Hello children, we will now discuss oogenesis, the next process of gametogenesis. Oogenesis is the process of formation of ovum or the egg which takes place in females. This oogenesis is a discontinuous process and it is discontinuous in case of humans. Now, what exactly is oogenesis? We will discuss later after all the steps of oogenesis. So, there are certain interesting things in human females, that is, in the first month of gestation period, that means the female embryo is growing in the mother's womb. So, we are talking about that growing embryo which is female. So, in the first month of gestation period, the female embryo is growing in the mother's womb, and this fetus, it is just 1 month old and gestation period has started. So, the embryonic development is taking place, but the fetus which is growing in the mother's body or womb, we are talking about that fetus. So, hope it is clear that we are talking about female fetus which is under the process of gestation. That means this female fetus is growing in the mother's body or womb. So, it has primary follicles in the ovary. As we are talking about the female fetus, it has 1700 primary follicles in the ovary. So, when the female's development has begun, that is during embryonic stage, the first month of female fetus, it has these number of primary follicles, these many numbers, that is 1700. Now, these primary follicles, they multiply or proliferate and the number increases. So, in the by the 7th month of gestation period or embryonic life, the number of primary follicles would increase as it continuously divides. So, by the 2nd month, the number becomes up to 6 lakhs and the primary follicles divide to form further follicles. Now, when fetus reaches the 5th month of embryonic life or gestation period, it reaches the 7 million, the primary follicles. From here it reaches to 7 million. That means they have already started dividing before the birth of a female child. So, these are the numbers which are seen in the ovary. After 5th month, now those primary follicles, they undergo atresia. It means shrinking of follicles. Now, out of 7 million follicles, major will undergo atresia. At birth, when female child is born, its ovaries have 2 million primary follicles. That means after birth, no new primary follicle is formed and a large number has undergone atresia. So, originally by 5th month it was 7 million and now it has become 2 millions. So, 2 millions are left now. This process is going to continue till puberty. Till puberty, female would have 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicle. So, only number of follicle which remains at the time of puberty is very less, which is because of atresia. From 7 million it reaches to 60,000 to 80,000. Now, out of these 500 primary follicle, only one develops into a mature egg. And this is the actual process which we talked of earlier also, when we discussed about the structure of ovary, the mass of primary follicles we have seen there, and one primary follicle enlarges to become Graafian follicle, in which egg formation or secondary oocyte formation would be there. So, the mass of 500 primary follicle, out of which only one develops into egg stage, one will grow up to the egg stage, and all these changes can be divided. If we see all these changes which are taking place here can be divided into two parts or two steps. One is before birth and the second is after birth. So, there are some changes which take place before birth, and then the changes will continue after puberty. So, there is a break between birth and puberty, and that is why we call the process as a discontinuous process. The oogenesis process is a discontinuous process. So, it begins at embryonic stage or embryonic life at birth, and it stops at the particular stage. Then it restarts at puberty, whereas in case of spermatogenesis, it starts at puberty and continuously goes on. Hence, we say oogenesis is a discontinuous process, and this oogenesis is completed in 3 phases. So, the first phase we see here is multiplication phase, where the cells they divide mitotically. Second is the growth phase, it will grow, and reason for growth here is vitellogenesis, that is yolk formation or yolk accumulation. Depending upon yolk required, the size of egg changes and it is different in different organisms. The third phase is the maturation phase, and here the meiotic division occurs. So, this is the process which takes place and it gets completed. So, let us see these stages. It is going to begin with primary follicles. There are mother cells. So, they divide mitotically to form oogonia. These are diploid cells. This phase is called as multiplication phase, and here only mitotic division takes place. Oogonia, this enters into the second phase, that is the growth phase, and growth phase is due to vitellogenesis. So, that is the yolk formation that takes place. Depending upon the yolk formed and accumulation, I told you the size will increase. For example, the size increases up to 200 times in case of humans, that is oogonium. When it reaches to its next stage, so it is 200 times in size. It increases 200 times in size. Then hen, in case of hen also 200 times it increases, in case of frog 2000 times, and 90,000 times in case of Drosophila egg. So, depending upon how much nourishment should the egg have, that would decide the amount of yolk to be accumulated. Now, it is totally dependent on the developmental process. Say for example, in human beings, to supply the nourishment to the developing embryo, placenta formation takes place. So, even if the egg has less yolk content, the nutrient would be supplied from the mother's body to the fetus, whereas in case of birds or other vertebrates like frogs, hens, here they are egg laying animals. So, when they lay eggs, the egg is then out of the mother's body. Depending upon how much yolk it has, that is the only nutrient material it has. So, because later on after it has been laid, there is no connection between the female bird in this case or the egg. So, egg should have some sufficient yolk content so that it can supply all the nourishment required, and that is why in case of hen the yolk content is sufficient. So what comes out of egg is a small bird. In case of frog, yolk content is there, it is not enough to form a complete organism, and that is why what hatches from the egg is larva, which is known as tadpole larva. The tadpole feeds and then it changes into an adult, that is the metamorphosis part. So depending upon the yolk content, we would classify eggs as microlithial, megalithetial, elithial, and this we will see later in the next session. So this is how the size is going to increase. So here it grows, and now you can see here it goes, and now we call it as primary oocyte, and it is diploid large cell. Enlargement is due to the Vitellogenesis. This primary oocyte now enters the next stage, that is maturation phase, which includes meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. So from one primary oocyte, only one secondary oocyte will be formed, but there is a reduction division, that is chromosome number is going to get reduced to half. So this nucleus, it is with the 2n here, and we see half the two nuclei are formed, and they both will have one set of the C chromosomes in them. So complete nourishment is in the cytoplasm which is present. So if the cytoplasm gets distributed evenly, half of the cytoplasm will go to one, and the other half will go to the other cell. But ultimately only one egg is going to be formed. That means the other cell is not going to change into the egg. So that much cytoplasm is going to get lost, which is present here. So to avoid that, there is an unequal distribution. You can see the size also, distribution of cytoplasm. So one cell remains small with the little cytoplasm, and the other cell retains complete cytoplasm. So here the minimum cytoplasm is present. This tiny cell will degenerate later on and is called first polar body, and the larger cell is called secondary oocyte. It is haploid because it is formed after the reduction division, and it is bigger in size because it has retained the cytoplasm in them. If you are able to recall structure of ovary, we discussed that egg is released at this stage, that is the secondary oocyte at this stage. So this is meiosis 1 here, and this new cell which is formed contains almost complete cytoplasm, and the smaller one is called as polar body. Egg gets released from the ovary at this stage. The later division, that is meiosis 2, is triggered only when the sperm enters. So entry of sperm is actually a stimulus for the secondary oocyte. So when the egg is released, this division is triggered by the entry of the sperm, and then the secondary oocyte divides to form the egg. The first polar body degenerates. In some cases it divides. If it divides, it further forms two polar bodies. Secondary oocyte undergoes meiosis 2. Again the cytoplasm should retain with one cell. So one cell will be bigger and the other cell will be tiny. This tiny cell is now called as second polar body, and the other bigger one is called ovum or ooted or egg. Egg formation takes place only when the sperm enters. So this second division of meiosis 2 division, it is only triggered by the entry of the sperm. Secondary oocyte is the stage when the egg is released here. So this is a discontinuous process, Why we say this discontinuous process? Because half of the process takes place before birth and half takes place after birth. So, certain development occurs after birth also. So, the question comes, where is oogenesis arrested? Oogenesis is arrested here, the where the meiosis 1 takes place. The primary ooze site starts the meiosis division, reduction division, which means it goes through prophase 1, prophase, metaphase 1, anaphase and all those stages, and in prophase 1, in diplotein stage of prophase 1 of meiosis 1, oogenesis is arrested, and after puberty only this will continue. So, after this, when menstrual cycle starts, the secondary oocyte formation will take place and the ovum, the secondary oocyte will be released. This meiosis 2 only takes place when the sperm enters, otherwise the egg will be lost in the form of secondary oocyte itself, and it will never reach the ooted stage. So, these are the different stages of oogenesis, and in the next session we will discuss about structure of egg and different types of egg on the basis of yolk accumulation. Thank you.